Boom. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Now we have an interview today that we are posting with the one and only Trace Mayer. And I'm going to pre-warn you guys that even though I look great right now, I actually ended up recording yesterday with Trace, and for some reason Zoom didn't record my side of the video. So I thought I would leave this as a little intro because for the next 35 minutes, all you get to see is Trace's beautiful face. But with that in mind, let's dive right in. Boom, we are live, ladies and gentlemen. We have a very special guest, even to the point where I dressed up for this episode today. Trace Mayer, thank you for joining us. How you doing today?
Yeah, doing great. So grateful to be here, and nice that you kind of dressing good, right? We gotta act the part. The new financial elite. We should act the part.
Yeah, exactly. You know, I've been a fan of yours for the last 2 years, although I know you've been in this space for a lot longer. One of my good friends, an attorney, introduced me to your work when you had I forget what the website was called, but I think it was Untraceable. Was that it?
How to Vanish.
How
Yeah,
to Vanish. This is
similar,
what
but
it was.
yeah, had Run to Gold and How to Vanish. So, a couple websites. How to Vanish is a lot of fun because uh, if they're gonna collect a whole bunch of email data and they're gonna store it for 5 years or whatever, like why not just teach millions of people how to use PGP encryption so that you massively increase the amount of storage space they need to use and electricity. So that was kind of a fun website. a little countercultural.
Yeah, you got to poke the bull when at these particular times in life. So for those of the
Well,
people,
they poked me.
yeah,
Like they're snooping on all my emails. I mean, there's a Fourth Amendment for a reason in the U.S. Constitution against unreasonable searches and seizures. They're the aggressive ones. All I was doing was like defending myself. I don't want to be snooped on. Like all this spying. I look at RussiaGate. I mean, this is completely absurd behavior that's been going on. And so, not only myself, but, teach a few million people how to protect themselves too. Have a little bit of fun doing it.
yeah, privacy is such an overlooked and extremely important area. So let's kind of reverse a little bit. For those of the Bear family that don't know who Trace Mayer is, or how we ended up in this conversation today, give us a little bit about your background and how you ended up in the Bitcoin and blockchain niche.
Yeah, so I had another blog, Run to Gold, and I had published a book actually the same week that Bitcoin got released, so 2009, called The Great Credit Contraction. And so I'd been writing about monetary science, applying it to current events. Gold was the solution. Bitcoin came on the scene. I was the first major blogger to start talking about it. About a nickel quarter, somewhere around there. And, just been a Bitcoin thought leader ever since. And as you can tell from kind of my How to Vanish and Run to Gold, a little bit agitator. In a nonviolent way, of course, just using math to protect ourselves from these lunatics that are control freaks. But other than that, just having a fun time and living life. You know, that's one thing you master whatever you do. And a lot of us, will master our careers or whatever, but we live our life, but we don't really put conscious thought into mastering the art of living. And so, that's kind of an important thing I think people should focus a little bit on, like why are we doing the stuff we're doing? Health, wealth, experiences, relationships, how can we optimize all that stuff to just have a good human experience instead of cowering in fear and because they're snooping on our emails. Like, what can we do about it, right? And how can we have fun doing it? Because we should be happy. That's what we're built to be.
Yeah, these are some great waves to actually have some tangible effect in the way the societies might be written, with all the code and the context into the potentials of distributed or decentralized governance protocols. And I've had fantastic dreams about the way we can, clean up disaster relief areas by basically bringing all this technology and letting people go into their own municipalities. So let's talk about some of the fun things that you've been working on the last little while, and maybe let's lean into what type of personal mastery stuff have you found to be super effective the last 2 years in terms of personal development and health and personal wealth?
Well, how are we getting into that, right? I mean,
Well, you were bringing us there. I figure we'll just go straight to it.
well, I play with magic internet money, but that aside, no, I kind of laid out those four foundational pillars for your life. Health, like you're gonna have a rough time in life if you're not healthy. So you should be guarding your health, protecting it when you can. I mean, that's not to say that things won't happen and that you can't make a good life even when you're unhealthy uh, or in a painful situation. For example, my uncle, he was a dairy farmer sitting under a bale of hay. Bale of hay fell on him, freak accident, broke his neck. Is in a wheelchair. 30 years. Average life expectancy is 10 years. But his wife stayed with him the whole time. Usually, in quadriplegic cases, they get divorced. She stayed with him, took care of him the whole time. He went around the world lecturing on disabilities and doing disability advocacy, like with Christopher Reeves and stuff. And it was funny. He was working at a university, and he had some extra time, so he would counsel students that thought they were having a hard time, right? So they'd come in and they might complain about something, and he was like, well, it could be worse. You could have a broken neck. But like, what are you going to do with your life with the cards you're dealt? I mean, we should protect our health, but like, say something like that happens, what are you going to do? Going to crawl into a hole, be depressed? Like, what you going to do? And then there's, so you got your health, and how about money? That's our next pillar. I mean, because you might be super rich, but if you have poor health, like, that's going to infringe on your lifestyle, right? And you can enjoy a sunset just as much as Bill Gates, right? So like, then you go from health to wealth, because with money, oh my gosh, you can start doing a lot of fun with money, and you can make a difference. I mean, some of these people, they think they can like control the climate, but they can't even control their own mind, right? I mean, it's just crazy. But if you look at how you spend your money, you're going to see what you prioritize, right? Like, one of the things that I've noticed, I'm out at a lot of conferences and whatnot, and I've impacted millions of people with the blogs. And I just finished an interview set with Saifedean Ammous, and we talked about time preference. And at these conferences, people come up to me and they're like, I quit drinking alcohol, I quit smoking, like, I got rid of a lot of bad habits, and I just buy Bitcoin and I hodl it. So they're changing their preferences, and they're also cutting. Like, if you think about it, they're starving the negative influences in their life, increasing their health, and setting a great financial foundation for themselves all at the same time. So when you look at your money, I mean, like, if you don't have your money under control, it's probably because you don't have your mind under control, right? Like, what you gonna do? You're just gonna like get whipped around and like go buy a slushie every day and a Mountain Dew, or are you gonna be disciplined and be able to think, right? Because like, you can't really think if you're totally whacked out and out of control. And that's reflected in your financial statements, your wealth. And so, and with wealth, like, you can start doing cool stuff, like, I like to help people. So experiences, being able to travel, being able to see the world, being able to help, kids or orphans. Like, I've been helping with some charities down in South America, clothing street orphans. I mean, I just write the check. Other people are doing the hard work. But because I have that wealth under control, like, I can help in that type of a way. 75 cents, we feed, clothe, house, educate street orphan kids. 75 cents a day per kid, right? Like, making a difference. You're not going to save everybody, but you might be able to help a few people. And those experiences, that's what's really going to give you the happiness or the life. Like, I mean, why are you getting the wealth? Like, what you going to do with it? So, like, because if you're just running around like collecting Mario coins to like get a high score or something, I mean, seriously, like Warren Buffett, he's 89 and he's still thinking about the money. I mean, wow, like, that's very interesting. Not to not to look too far or peer too much into him, but like that's really where the motivations and stuff are. I mean, sure, he just gave another 3.6 billion to charity, but I don't know. Buffett's an interest. Um, and so then, you know, after experiences, like it's not necessarily where you go, it's who you go with. And
Yeah.
so, like, you know, you got good relationships with your parents, you got good relationships with your siblings if you have them. Did you, you know, if they passed on or whatever, like, did you have good relationships? Have you worked through some of the issues? You know, because nobody's perfect, but I think, you know, in the vast majority of cases, like people try to do the best they can with where they're at and where they're going. And so, you know, like before the show, we were talking about, I was just over in Europe for about a month. Went to a Bitcoin conference in Munich and some other stuff. But while I was there, because it was the 75th anniversary of D-Day, I went and toured Munich, which was the capital of Nazism. And then I also, on June 6th, the 75th anniversary of D-Day, I went and toured Pont de Hook and Omaha Beach and Utah Beach. You know, not because I want to like reverence the state. Like I think D-Day is like just shows the insanity of the state. But both of my grandfathers stormed the beaches that morning on D-Day. Like one was at Utah, one was at Omaha, and you know I'm sure that just in the chaos, you know, the trauma of seeing entire boats getting mowed down with machine guns and all the dead bodies floating in the water and like all the explosions. I mean, that's very traumatic. And who knows what type of residual effect that then passes down the generations. Like I had a friend in New York. His parents were Russians, and he is first generation American immigrant. And his grandparents were killed in the Holocaust. And his grandparents would lock his parents in the closet to keep them safe from the Nazis. You know, when they were really little kids. But guess what? Guess what his parents did to him and his siblings? Locked them in the closet, right? Because that fear was like so deeply ingrained, like, you know, in the brain stem, you know, acting almost like a reptile. And so, you know, he had this trauma inflicted on him that was really the result of like generations of trauma. And so it's not that his parents were bad people, even though they were doing, you know, what some might consider bad things. They just didn't really know any better. And so, you know, like the state has just caused a real mess on humanity. And that's one of the reasons that motivates me with Bitcoin, because it's sound money. And if we can take back the right to money and to property rights, you know, we can determine what we're spending our resources on. And that's going to determine our experiences, you know, and we can starve the bad and we can feed the good as a result. Like it's a way to wage economic warfare. But we have to get ourselves in order, right? Like, okay, well, we get a bunch of money. Like if we're not in order, we're just going to keep screwing stuff up. So like, what you going to do? You're going to fix yourself and begin to think straight, or are you just going to keep perpetuating the problems of the past, you know? And so, you know, that's a little bit that's been on my mind, you know, over the last month, just having like seen all the effects of World War II. Like how did that happen? You know, it's just wild to think like that. I mean, it was just so crazy. So anyways, that's a little bit of my thoughts on those areas and how to live a good life. You know, we need to master that art of living, because money's just going to make you more who you are. And so if you're a liar and a deceiver and you're just in it for yourself and you want to screw people, like you get more money, you're just going to do more of that. And, you know, we've seen that in the Bitcoin space. We've seen people that have gone that way. And I mean, they think that they're helping people, but in fact, they're actively misleading them. And it's unfortunate, but you know, the money just makes you more who you are.
Yeah, I think you touched on some really great topics, and some of the stuff we focus on the arcane bear is really trying to look at more of the conceptual value of some of these words, right? So for instance, the word distributed, you know, or the word wealth or assets, there's so many ways that we can look at the idea. You know, I try to remind people that your charisma, your your time. Well, most importantly, your time. These are such valuable assets that we overlook that already make us generally wealthy. And then I think, the sentiment you said about being able to appreciate the sunset to the degree that Bill Gates does is really a choice of gratitude. And I think a lot of people, the reason why they remain unsuccessful is because they choose to remain poor in thought instead of having reverence and going through the process and being adventurous too, like you're mentioning with going to visit the beaches of D-Day. It's high time we look at our tragedy and understand that this is a part of the human species. It's not such a distant past that we're killing one another for political or ideological differences or religious differences, and to remember that this is still a part of our story today. And that what I think you're highlighting here too is that what do you do when you get the money? There's a lot of people like, oh, we're going to make it. It's like, well, when you actively get to a place where you can make a difference in the world and you have the tool or the skill set of money at your hands, a lot of people make the wrong choices. A lot of people that are successful are there by strictly randomness, and whatever they did to get there won't last. So what I want to do is I want to bring it back to some of the beginning of the conversation, because you made some, I remember reading some of your tweets to Peter Schiff back in 14 or 15. And I used to bank with Euro Pacific Capital because I actually like his bank at the time. It's fully funded. They had no debt, no leverage, nothing. It's one of the only soluble banks on the planet. So I actually liked what he had done, but I was so baffled that the idea of a decentralized and consumer-based money just went so far over his head because of how married he was to his particular belief in gold. So bring us back to some of the early 2000s. What price were you buying Bitcoin at? What type of conversations were you having with people about the crazy internet money back in those days? Because now it's got a bit more, credibility to where we're at. What about back then?
Yeah, started publicly recommending it at a quarter, to try and gather people to take the beachhead of monetary sovereignty, which, we did. Went after the libertarians because they're crazy, right? Went after the gold bugs because they should have understood it. You mentioned Peter Schiff. Like, I was at an investment conference in Palm Springs, and I'd known Peter from the Ron Paul days. And I had just finished an interview, and so the cameras were all set up, and Peter was walking by. And so, I struck up conversation with Peter, and we're chatting, and it was really good, conversation. Then we're talking about Bitcoin, and the guys who'd done the interview were like, man, this is really good. Can we film it? And Peter was like, well, no, I don't want you to make me look stupid. And so I was like, wow, that's the motivation, huh? Instead of trying to have an honest debate on a topic that everybody might not understand, we want to try and protect our reputation so that we can make more money off of fees from the people, instead of giving them honest, subjective assessment of what's really going on so they can make the best choices. So there we go, looking at, not to read into Peter's motives or his intentions, but that statement, really kind of, caused my antenna to go up regarding Mr. Schiff. And since then, we've just seen a lot of fun between Mr. Schiff and the Bitcoin community, and having the price go from about, I think it was $16 when we had that conversation. So having it go from $16 to 10,000, that's always kind of fun too. Hey, Peter, what you gonna do? You gonna buy some Bitcoin?
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, when you become right by logic, essentially, it's you don't want to be the guy that wins the award for the best hedge fund of the year. You want the result of actually being the best hedge fund potentially, not just the award. And I think what you're saying, or what I'm trying to take in, and what happened there is that generally most of us don't like being wrong. Right? People are very attached to being right and to being recognized for their reputation for knowing what they're talking about. Whereas I think generally what makes for strong characterizations of individuals is the ability to go into a space where you don't necessarily know and actually learn. And, Peter was a prime example of just totally missing something that was designed for the people that were looking for basically, I'm going to use it as a brand to choose instead of the fiat that we were forced to pick from. And it still baffles me to this date that he doesn't understand that even though there's like, okay, you could say that Bitcoin's like the only choice. It's, you know, the idea of distribution requires competition, and that all of these other cryptocurrencies are just, it's like a different choice in sunglasses. It's like if I want to choose between Ray-Ban or Dragon, but at least I get to choose because it's not the government sunglasses that they're giving me. And this in itself in the monetary world is such a huge revolution. It really baffled me that he missed some of the philosophical stuff that has been taking place.
Yeah, well, and along that point, like, you know, I coined the term hodler of last resort because we don't have lenders of last resort because it's equity based. And whether it was gold or Bitcoin or whatever it is, I've always wanted people to understand exactly what they're buying and why they're buying it, like why they're allocating their capital to that. And the purpose or the motivation behind that is because I respect their agency and their ability to choose. And I want them to be able to look at everything from all the different angles and understand exactly what they're doing and why they're doing it. And because I respect them as people, you know, I mean, I respect their ability, their choice. And so, you know, to not have discussion and at least try to, you know, at least try to understand something, because we have to understand something to make a choice about it. Otherwise we're just flying blind, right? And so, you know, I think like running away or not discussing the topic or whatever, you know, because we don't want to look stupid. Well, that, I mean, that's how we learn, is by asking questions. I mean, if we're afraid of like our persona, nobody knows everything. The world's just way too complex. Like we have to ask questions if we want to learn about stuff. Like there's no harm in that. And like uh, there, as long as you're sincerely trying to learn something and help other people in the process. I mean, if you have what you think is superior knowledge and you want to help people by sharing that superior knowledge with them, like, you know, let's have the debate. Let's get in the marketplace of ideas. That's what that boxing ring is for. Uh, but you know, if we twist it and pervert the meaning or the reason to have that boxing ring and think that it's for our own, you know, for us to aggrandize ourselves, you know, what you gonna do?
Yeah.
You're falling into a trap on your motivations, and that's gonna infringe on like your happiness inside. So, you know, you got to watch out for those traps. They're very, very sneaky.
Yeah, it reminded me of what we see now today in the kind of the scientific world, which are people that are supposedly professional critics. And they very rarely seem to be able to take in the facts that are in front of them and just argue against points that don't necessarily exist. It really, I mean, the whole thing with Peter baffled me because I did like a lot of the stuff. I was a fan of Peter Schiff when I was growing up. When I was quite young, I've been a libertarian since I was around 13 years old. I'm like, oh, I'm being sold out to my government. I want nothing to do with this. Anyways, let's bring it back a bit more to the present. What are some of the exciting things that you see taking place in the blockchain space that's maybe not Bitcoin? You know, for me, it's been some of the ideas around potential distribution of municipal governance technology, this type of thing. What type of stuff is interesting you in this space lately?
Yeah, I mean, there's voting. You know, it sure be nice if we could actually know like the votes are accurate and honestly counted. And I don't want to take your word for it. Don't trust, verify, prove it. Like, you know, so I think that's pretty cool development in the space. It's not Bitcoin related specifically. That also would, you know, whether it's governmental elections or whether it's just elections when it comes to corporate governance. I mean, there's the Procter and Gamble case where they didn't even know who had the right to vote the shares. And they finally settled it, even though they like went back and recounted everything like 3 times. I mean, it's absolutely insane that we don't know exactly who owns what, where, and that we don't know necessarily what the property rights that attach to all that stuff. Look at the Dole Foods case. You know, this is what Caitlin and I have been working on in Wyoming with the Wyoming Blockchain Task Force and the legislators and the governor there and the banking commissioner. You know, and those laws are they're law now, right? And we're going to be able to create special purpose depository banks that can custody digital assets. They're if you want laws that were written by hodlers of digital assets, like these are those laws, you know, because we saw with the NSA and NIST, they compromised the technological security, right? Because they put a back door into one of the cryptographic algorithms. And we've seen with the way they've done the UCC and Section 8, these financial firms have weakened property rights, just like the NSA have weakened technological security. And so, with Bitcoin, we've got the technological security, but now we need the legal security around those assets, in order to further cement and safeguard and remove attack surfaces and attack vectors on our wealth. And so, that's what Caitlin and I have been doing in Wyoming, all pro bono, all at our own cost, hundreds of hours each. Caitlin, has put in way more than I have. But, both Caitlin and I and Chris Land, the legislative attorney, I mean, we spent 4 hours Christmas afternoon drafting this bill. I mean, like we're putting some serious blood and sweat into getting this law passed, and helping provide a jurisdiction that protects those property rights, because that's really what the world needs. We need solid, rock hard property rights, both technologically and legally, because that's what lifts people out of poverty. Is property rights. And so that's what we're really trying to do in Wyoming, is find a way to hack property rights so that we get the most amount of property rights that are the strongest for the least amount of cost, and be able to distribute it out to the most amount of people. So and hey, we're not saving the world, but we're making a difference, right? We're at least doing something. We're trying.
Yeah, I think first off, hats off to you all for doing that. I think it's commonly overlooked, but a lot of the times the leaders of new entrepreneurial niches in space are generally the people that end up helping write the laws and put in place some of the regulation that goes in there, because they're the most formidable minds in the space. So I'm very grateful that you guys are doing that. That's what.
Yeah, I mean, who do you want working on writing the laws? Coinbase?
Yeah.
They just hired the neutrino guys who actively and intentionally helped governments hunt down journalists and murder them. Like, you want Coinbase helping write the laws when they've shown such blatant disregard for human rights? And then Brian Armstrong not even apologizing, but think that he is totally in the right hiring these guys.
Yeah.
Seriously? I mean, why are you giving that company any resources at all? I mean, just wow, really, you're going to help write their paychecks? This is monetary warfare. Starve the bad, feed the good. So you've got Coinbase, then you've got and Coinbase has been active in actually attacking property rights. And who else do we want to have writing the laws? How about Zuckerberg with Libra?
Yeah.
You want him writing the laws? No, I mean, we have to actually do something, or we're just going to continue to get trampled on. So start doing some heavy lifting, start doing something, because if you think you can just free ride off of the efforts of everybody else, I wouldn't necessarily bank on that. Better get in the fight.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons why we started the Arcane Bear was for me at least, the very real realization that we are now in the space where we're writing the code layers for the next financial and the next government systems that will come into place. And if we screw this up, it can very easily fall into the hands of tyranny, because this technology can go either way. Because technology unto itself, just like a tool, is inert. I can kill you with a guitar string, or I can put it on a guitar and make it sound beautiful. It's all dependent upon the people that are actually using the technology at their hands. So one of the reasons why I decided it was a high time to stop sitting in the grass of the jungle with the sloths and to help raise the voices is because we need as many intelligent and conscientious, I think probably more than intelligent, more conscientious people at the table, because governance generally attract the moths like light. All the people that want to rule and cause harm to other people is generally where the government attracts types of people, because the intelligent and the conscientious are not necessarily drawn to those positions. So I think what you're doing there in Wyoming is extremely important. I think a lot of people should take note for that as well, really forging the way. The other thing I wanted to touch into as well, it sounds like maybe you've read the book, The Mystery of Capital by Henry de Soto, which talks about talks about the necessity for property and property rights is one of the base levels of what we need as a society. And I mean, I want to give a shout out to Medici Ventures for their work with Ravencoin in this, because a lot of what they're doing is trying to create that solid land registry, and they're hitting places like Zimbabwe and Ethiopia, where you have no real jurisdiction over the property that's owned there. Have you been looking at, do you look at, do you speculate in the alternative digital asset world, or are you leaning into, I mean, I lean mostly into Bitcoin, but is there any speculations on your radar that interest you?
Not really, and not lately. I've been much more interested in LedgerX and what they're doing with the derivatives, and they're CFTC regulated. So, I'm much more interested in that. And then there's just so much happening with Bitcoin that, I don't want to get distracted by stuff.
Right.
Because anything that's good is going to get incorporated into Bitcoin anyways. So, these other altcoins, they're great as test beds, and there might even be some financial opportunity there. I just seem to have my hands full, with Schnorr signatures and Taproot and Graphroot and Lightning Network and the derivatives being traded on LedgerX, and trying to figure out how to price those and
Well, let's
everything.
go. Take us down that path then. What do you see the future? Is most of this going to be second layer add-ons for Bitcoin's code, atomic swaps? What do you think about LedgerX? I'd love to hear more about this.
Well, I mean, LedgerX is a completely different topic because it's dealing with the Bitcoin derivatives, the calls and the puts, and eventually futures. But when I definitely, I see Bitcoin as it'll ossify, and then it'll become the risk-free asset worldwide, and then we'll use additional layers to accomplish other goals and use cases. So like Lightning Network and Schnorr signatures and Taproot and Graphroot and smart contracts and MAST, the Merkle's abstract syntax trees, submarine swaps, atomic swaps, decentralized exchanges, Liquid, and putting assets on Liquid, and like Blockstream just came out with the ability to atomically swap assets that are on Liquid. So I mean, just there's a ton of financial innovation happening all around Bitcoin that's incredibly exciting, and Bitcoin's got those network effects already in terms of liquidity, scalability, security, the 7 network effects I've articulated. Nothing's anywhere close. So like if you want to play in the big boy part of the pool, big boy and big girl part of the pool, like Bitcoin's where it's at. Otherwise you can go play in a kiddie pool with one of these altcoins. But you want serious work that's getting done, it's getting done on Bitcoin. So I'm incredibly excited about that, and we have more people than ever contributing, writing code, submitting pull requests, discussing stuff, working on it. Like the Bitcoin project, and look at the GitHub repo. I mean, it's impossible to like stay up with everything because there's so much happening. So that's all incredibly exciting to me. Whether it's a GitHub repo or the Lightning repo, all of this.
Brilliant. Yeah, I think we've got a brilliant future ahead of us. There's obviously some other worrying things, but we'll leave some of the politics off the table because it's never a great discussion. We're probably about 40 minutes in. What type of entrepreneurial things do you do for excitement? Because I know one of the things for me, I really am driven by the work that I do. Like I don't like doing work to make more money. I'm always extremely enticed by the work that keeps moving me forward. What type of work-life balance do you have that keeps you motivated every day to get up and hustle as hard as you do?
Well, it's interesting because Mises he has a chapter on the creative genius, and the creative genius, they do their work not necessarily to make money like an entrepreneur would, but they do their work because the work itself is intrinsically fulfilling. And because a lot of people, they'll do their career work to accomplish some other ends, like, okay, we're going to be the trash man so that we can provide for our family and like, put food on the table or whatever. But then you get the people that are doing their work solely because the work is intrinsically rewarding, that's why we have a lot of starving artists, right? Because the work that they want to do is just so much fun. It's just that nobody will pay them to do it, right? And so because now, at least in my case, I don't need to be the trash man if I don't want to. And so I'm finding that I'm shifting a lot more attention towards creative genius type endeavors. I mean, I've always kind of done that stuff. Why'd I talk about Bitcoin for free and help people in that sense? It's because monetary sovereignty was such an intrinsically rewarding goal to help mobilize people around. Um, you know, and so I was willing to take the risk and everything with doing that. But yeah, so I'm trying to bring some of the the entrepreneurial tools and skill sets though towards these other types of work, whether it's charity or whatnot, because like charity is an interesting conundrum. Like what are you gonna do? Are you gonna like donate a bunch of food to like help starving people? Because you lower the price of food to nothing, which destroys the market for local farmers to be able to allocate capital and raise crops. And so it's actually, in some ways, it's counterproductive, because sure, they get the fish today, but they eat it at the cost of destroying the local market. And so they never develop the ability to catch their own fish, right? Or to raise their own crops. And so, looking at these problems, because I mean, I think it's just absurd that a lot of people in the world, hundreds of millions of people, like have one bowl of rice to eat a day, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I just think that's absurd. We can't really, if you're hungry and starving, like it's very difficult to use your mind and your capacity that you have as a human being to, just live a life, right? If you're hungry and starving. But figuring out how to solve some of these problems in a wise way, where you're not destroying the local market for the farmers and destroying the ability of the people to become self-sufficient. Because ultimately, like there's a sense of accomplishment when we do stuff on our own.
Yeah.
And so like we have to raise our own food. If we just have it given to us, like we have no sense of accomplishment. We haven't built ourself.
Yeah.
And it's much more about building ourself, building that human capital, than it is about, taking people out of the bad situation. Because if you take the bad situation out of the interior parts of the person, then the person will take themselves out of the bad situation.
Yeah.
But if we try to just take somebody out of the bad situation, like we haven't fixed the real cause of that bad situation. And so they're just going to get themselves back in a bad situation. And you see this with homeless all the time, and I put a tweet out about this, with all the automation that's happening and the jobs that are getting creatively destroyed as a result of that. Like what does one side of the political party in the US do? They want to raise the minimum wage. Well, all that does is price that labor out of the market and make more automating at a faster rate even more profitable for the business owners. And so by raising the minimum wage, you're actually contributing to the homelessness,
Yeah.
because you're pricing all those people out of the market and making it so that the business owners and the entrepreneurs can't hire them.
Mm-hmm.
And encourages McDonald's or whoever to put in the automated food ordering systems. Now, don't get me wrong, having all of that automation and stuff is good because it makes us more productive. It increases our productivity in the economy. But to kick people while they're down is, we because you're harming both the business owner and the potential labor by having that minimum wage law that is interfering in the ability of those two to freely trade. And so we actually end up having to automate at a faster rate as business owners, deploying capital when we might not necessarily do that. And we might still hire people to do the work, because that would be the better economic decision to make. So it's, these questions of, I think we want to help, and I don't want to like impugn the motives of the people behind things like the minimum wage. It's just like, I'm not sure you understand the unintended consequences
Yeah.
of that policy, because we have record homelessness happening, and a lot of it is because of governmental policies that have been put in place.
Yeah, I think people often overlook the idea that, and we'll go back to what you started the conversation or started this particular idea off with, is that that if you remove the obstacle from someone, you're actually removing the something that might be entirely rewarding for that person to have overcome and find purpose and meaning for their life. And a lot of the times, what happens is you're removing a lot of the meaning and purpose, and this is why I think we end up with such abstract psychological problems, because I don't think homelessness is a cause of just not having work. I think that it's generally a disconnect from community and a lack of real purpose on the planet to be able to do anything almost at all. The other really interesting thing here is we'll save some of this for the conversation when we're done here. But I've been spending the last 2.5 years meditating on and building on how we try to solve some of the problems that are so noticeable in the charitable space, because charity in itself is actually one of the problems from multiple scales. First, it's not a business model of any type. You can't just give things away to people. But the other important part I think to understand is what you brought it up here, is that things like minimum wage are actually expediting the process, because you're now trying to remove obstacles where people, one of the reasons why I found frequency of success is because I kept getting hard with that. I kept getting hit with those walls of obstacle. And the only way you overcome them is by, trying something new out, going a different path. And if you just remove those obstacles, there's no real, as humans, we've spent thousands of years overcoming these life and death situations. And I think we've done a great deal of disservice to our communities now for kids and the elderly is entirely different. You want to just be trying to help remove obstacles so that they're not getting killed or destroyed for no particular reason. But almost everybody in between that range, it really thrives off personal development. And if you take that obstacle away from them, they have no real reward of success. Like even if you just gave them $1 million, it would not last, because they don't have the personal restraint and development and discipline in place to actually make any type of useful effect with what they've earned. So I love to hear that you're working in that space, and I actually would like to continue this for a few minutes when we're done the call, just to chat.
Yeah, it actually reminds me of a story I heard, and I actually experienced something very similar, because I was driving my car, well, my truck at the time, and I got stuck in some snow, and I guess I didn't really understand the physics as well, so I had to get like this Suburban came by, and they actually towed my truck out of the situation. But the story I heard, similar, someone got stuck in the snow, and they couldn't get out of the snow. And so what they did is they actually put a whole bunch of firewood in the back of the truck. And the burden of the firewood gave the tires enough traction to get out of the snow, right? So it was actually the burden that became the blessing, right? Like they needed the burden in order to get out. Like otherwise they're just going to be stuck, and then they'd have to wait for like some Suburban to tow them out. Which fortunately for me, like the Suburban came by like 10 minutes after I like fell off the road into the ditch, and because everything was like totally snowed over, and like I was just barely out of high school, so I had no idea, and I grew up in Florida, so I had no idea what to do in snow, but that's how we learn. We learn by experience, and then we read stories, and it's like, oh, so like instead of just sitting up there like twiddling my thumbs waiting for the Suburban to come by, which was, I was like, oh my gosh, so grateful the Suburban came by, but like what would I have done had the Suburban not come by? And it's like, oh, I should have gone and like got a whole bunch of stuff and put it in the back bed of the truck, and that would have given me traction to like get out of the ditch, right? And so often I think people like think that leisure and not having anything to do is like what they want. And I mean, you mentioned you meditate, and it's like, man, I like the Dalai Lama said that he spends like 4 hours a day meditating, and I'm kind of like, man, I wish I could do that, because like I guess my meditation consists of like I wake up, I take a deep breath, I'm like, man, I have another day. I'm grateful I have another day, and then I'm like off and running, like because I got so many things to like get done and accomplish, and then I brush my teeth and I'm like, man, I had a good day, and like I put my head on my pillow and I start meditating to fall asleep, and like I'm out in a couple minutes, and like then it's the next day, right? Because I think that happiness, that this self improvement, like this world that we're in, it's really a world of uses, and when we're useful and helpful to other people, like that's what begins to get that intrinsic happiness and reward.
Absolutely.
Otherwise, you fall in the trap of just chasing Mario coins, right? And you may think that you're happy doing that, but not really. It's an illusion, and eventually you're gonna see it's an illusion, and that's gonna be quite an uncomfortable processing period that you're gonna end up going through.
Yeah, so I just to rewind there, I think yes, absolutely. People overlook the fact that stressors and burdens are what make them stronger, and then they just hope to be stronger, but with no particular obstacle to overcome. I think it's a hugely important idea to take in. And then just to touch back on the meditation, I'm not going outside and just sitting for an hour all the time. A lot of the times my meditations actually are moments where I just like when I'm like, I'm going to sweep the house today, or I'm going to go dig in the garden and plant some tree.
Yeah.
This time out where I try to connect with, let's say the more primitive aspects of things I like, where I'm like, I'm going to sit and listen to the wind right now, because mostly the reason why I do this too is because there is so much wealth in the moment of now that can be appreciated just by being like, oh wow, look at all the things that are around me. And that's what I use meditation for, because it's one of these things where first off, I agree with you. Most people need to derive their purpose from actually helping other individuals. It's one of the things that took me a little while to learn as an entrepreneur. One of my best friends and mentors here, his business is probably in the few $1 billion a year in revenue. But when he sold it, he sold his portion for a few $100 million. And one of the things that he really taught me was that you can make an absurd amount of money by providing something valuable to your customers and your community. And there's one of the things that I hadn't noticed as a younger little budding entrepreneur was I used to think that money was only made through kind of screwing people over. But you realize that very, very quickly, I think, once you start to go up that ladder, that it's about conscientious and competent behavior that really makes most people successful. And that conscious competence is generally extended to how do we help other people. So I really love hearing that. I think you've got a fantastic head on your shoulders and heart in your center there. So I've had a super great time chatting with you today. I don't want to cut it short. I think we could probably do this for a few hours together. So what I would like to do is I definitely love to have you back on the show in the next few months. I'm going to leave. Do you still have the Vanish website, or is it just the tracemayer.com now?
Well, it's not tracemayer.com, it's tracemayer.net. But yeah,
right.
howtovanish.com is still up. So's Run to Gold. Bitcoin Knowledge Podcast is kind of fun, bitcoin.kn. And then Twitter, like @TraceMayer. Yeah, those are kind of different outlets where I put stuff out occasionally.
Yeah, I love it. For everyone that's new to Trace's work, please follow him on the social media channels. We will leave those down in the links below, and I'll make sure that they're written correctly. TraceMayer.net. Thank you. Again, Trace, I've had such a great time chatting with you today. I really love hearing the values that you bring to the table. I think that's extremely important, and to know that you guys are working on legislation and stuff like this as well gives me I think there's going to be a brighter future because of people like you in the space. So again, thank you for all the work that you're doing. I would like to keep you on for a few minutes afterwards because just to dive into a different topic of conversation. Is there anything else you'd like to leave everyone off with before we go? I think we gave them a lot of value today, Trace.
No, it was a great little chat. We got to talk about a lot more than just the magic internet money. you know, because like why are we getting the magic internet money, right? But yeah, being in the fight just by holding Bitcoin, like you're in the fight, right? So like direct that capital, economic warfare, and starve the stuff that you don't like in the world. You know, if there's bad stuff out there that you don't like, starve it. Like don't let any of your resources go there. Be a little bit more conscientious about what you're allocating your capital onto, whether it's your time or your money.
Brilliant. Ladies and gentlemen, Trace Mayer, thank you for joining us today. You even, like I said at the beginning, you even got me so excited. Put on a damn suit. I appreciate that.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Everyone, remember to give us those thumbs up if you like this content. If you don't like what we do, give us a thumbs up, because YouTube doesn't care. It likes the energy any way we go, just the same as the universe. Leave your thoughts, your comments. Be sure to follow Trace and all of his fantastic work on the websites linked down below. This is Teal with the Arcane Bear, bringing you another fantastic guest. Trace, again, thank you one more time for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.